Standing at a crowded boarding gate, a successful father clutches premium tickets his family saved years to buy. Suddenly, a smirking agent holds their passports hostage. "These don't look right," she sneers loudly, broadcasting suspicion across the terminal. His young daughter starts crying as security guards step closer, hands resting menacingly on heavy utility belts. It is a nightmare scenario of blatant profiling and public humiliation. However, this arrogant agent has absolutely no idea who stands before her or why. Within moments, corporate headquarters will call her desk directly to deliver a career-ending twist. The sprawling expanse of Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport hummed with the chaotic, synchronized energy of thousands of travelers. Overhead, fluorescent lights cast a sterile, unyielding glow over the polished floors. The air smelled faintly of overpriced roasted coffee, floor wax, and the undeniable anxiety of impending departures. For the Langford family, however, the morning was supposed to be nothing short of magical. Marcus Langford adjusted the strap of his leather carry-on duffel, a quiet smile playing on his lips as he watched his wife Elena wrangle their 2 children. Today was their anniversary, and they were embarking on a weeks-long, no-expenses-spared vacation to Paris, followed by a train ride down to the French Riviera. It was a trip they had meticulously planned for months. Elena, a highly respected pediatric surgeon, looked radiant despite the early hour. She wore a tailored beige trench coat over a comfortable but chic travel ensemble, her braided hair pulled back elegantly. Beside her, their young son was profoundly engrossed in a video game on his tablet, while their young daughter clutched a worn-out stuffed bear named Barnaby, her wide brown eyes taking in the massive planes visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. "Can you believe we're actually doing this?" Elena asked, stepping up beside Marcus and leaning her head against his shoulder. "Our anniversary. 2 kids and now Paris." Marcus wrapped an arm around her waist, kissing the top of her head. "We earned it. You especially. No pages, no emergency surgeries, no hospital politics. Just croissants, the Eiffel Tower, and pretending we know how to speak French." They had booked first-class tickets on Transglobal Airways. It was an extravagance, certainly, but Marcus wanted this trip to be flawless. What neither Elena nor the kids knew, however, was that Marcus's connection to Transglobal Airways went far beyond being a loyal, frequent flyer. As the executive vice president of global logistics for Apex Holdings, a massive conglomerate that owned the primary catering and ground support contracts for Transglobal, Marcus interacted with the airline's executive board on a regular basis. He didn't like to flaunt his corporate weight, preferring to travel quietly and anonymously. He believed in the system working the way it was supposed to for everyone. "Flight to Paris, Charles de Gaulle, is now ready for priority boarding." A sterile, automated voice echoed over the public address system. "We invite our first-class and Diamond Medallion members to approach the gate at this time." "That's us," Marcus said, his voice laced with excitement. He knelt down to his son's level. "All right, buddy. Save the game. Time to get on the big plane." His son quickly tapped the screen and slid the tablet into his backpack, while Elena took their daughter's small hand. The family of 4 gathered their belongings and made their way toward the priority lane, a designated runway of plush red carpet sectioned off by velvet ropes. At the podium stood Brittany Langford. Brittany was a veteran gate agent, a woman who wore her navy blue uniform like a suit of armor. Her silver hair was sprayed into a rigid, unmoving helmet, and her lips were pursed in a perpetual state of disapproval. She had been working the gates for decades, and over that time she had developed a profound sense of authority, a tiny fiefdom where she controlled who ascended into the skies and who remained grounded. As Marcus and his family approached the red carpet, Marcus noticed the way Brittany's eyes darted toward them. It was a look he was entirely too familiar with as a successful black man in America. It was the look of calculation, the sudden tightening of the jaw, the ocular pat-down that silently asked, "Do you belong here?" Ahead of them, a middle-aged white couple in sweatpants handed over their boarding passes. Brittany greeted them with a wide, artificial smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, welcome back. Have a wonderful flight to Paris." She cooed, handing back their documents with a flourish. "Thank you," the couple replied, strolling down the jet bridge. Marcus stepped up to the podium, placing his family's 4 embossed American passports on the counter. Topped with their pristine first-class boarding passes, he offered a warm, polite smile. "Good morning, Langford family. Party of 4. Brittany did not return the smile. She stared down at the documents, then slowly raised her eyes to look at Marcus, then Elena, and finally the 2 children. The silence stretched for a beat too long, transforming from a momentary pause into something heavy and deliberate. "First class?" Brittany asked, her voice carrying a sharp, skeptical edge. She didn't touch the passports yet. She just pointed at the boarding passes with a manicured finger, as if they were evidence in a crime. "Yes, that's correct," Marcus replied, keeping his tone light and conversational. "Seats 2A, 2B, 3A, and 3B. Brittany finally picked up the passports. She didn't scan them immediately. Instead, she opened Marcus's passport, looked at the photo, and then looked up at his face, her eyes narrowing. She repeated the process with Elena. When she got to the children's passports, she let out a loud, theatrical sigh. "I'm going to need to see the credit card used to purchase these tickets," Brittany said flatly, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. Marcus blinked, slightly taken aback. In all his years of flying, both domestically and internationally, he had never been asked to present a credit card at the gate, especially not after already clearing TSA security and the initial check-in counter at the front of the airport. "We booked these directly through our frequent flyer portal online," Marcus explained patiently. "We used miles for a portion, and the rest was put on my corporate card. I don't have that specific physical card on me, as it's a digital corporate account." Brittany's fingers immediately began to strike the keys of her computer with aggressive, percussive force. Clack, clack, clack. "No physical card," she said, her voice rising in volume, ensuring the passengers lining up in the economy lane behind them could hear. "So trans-global policy strictly requires verification of payment for high-value tickets flagged by the system." "Flagged by the system?" Elena interjected, her maternal instincts immediately recognizing the shifting dynamic. She pulled their son and daughter slightly closer to her legs. "What do you mean, flagged? We checked our bags an hour ago at the main desk. The agent there had no issues. We have our boarding passes right here." "The main desk agent makes mistakes," Brittany retorted coldly. She held up the 4 passports like a winning poker hand. "My screen is telling me there's an irregularity with this booking. First class to Paris is a high-value transaction, sir, and frankly, these passports look handled." Marcus felt the familiar heavy knot tighten in his stomach, the heat of 100 eyes burning into the back of his neck, the whispers starting in the queue behind them. He knew exactly what was happening. Brittany Langford had looked at a black family holding first-class tickets and unilaterally decided that something must be illegal, fraudulent, or stolen. The nightmare was just beginning. "Handled," Marcus repeated, his voice dropping an octave, settling into a calm, firm baritone. It was his boardroom voice, the one he used when dismantling aggressive negotiations. "Ma'am, they are passports. They have been stamped in multiple countries. They are supposed to look handled." "Don't take that tone with me, sir," Brittany snapped back, her eyes flashing with indignant authority. "I am simply doing my job to protect the airline from ticket fraud. We have a massive problem with stolen miles and identity theft, particularly on international routes." Behind them, A tall, balding passenger in a gray suit, let's call him Marcus Hale, huffed loudly, checking his gold wristwatch. "Come on," he muttered to his traveling companion. "Some of us have a flight to catch. If they don't have the right tickets, move them aside." Brittany offered a sympathetic, commiserating look to Marcus Hale over Marcus Langford's shoulder. "I apologize for the delay, folks. Security protocols," she announced to the line. She then turned her steely gaze back to the Langfords. "I'll need to ask you a few security questions before I can even attempt to override this system block," Brittany stated, folding her arms across her chest. "System block," Marcus said, his eyes locking onto the reflection of her computer screen in the glass window behind her. He couldn't read the text, but there was no red flashing error, no locked screen, just the standard boarding manifest. "Fine, ask your questions, but I suggest you do it quickly. My family is getting on this plane." Brittany smirked, a tiny, infuriating curl of her lip. "What is your occupation, Mr. Langford?" Elena gasped quietly. "Are you serious? You're asking for his resume to board a flight?" "Standard verification, ma'am," Brittany lied smoothly. "I am an executive in corporate logistics," Marcus answered, keeping his face perfectly neutral. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him angry. If he raised his voice, if he showed aggression, he knew exactly how the narrative would spin. He would become the angry black passenger, and she would become the threatened employee. It was a trap he had navigated his entire life. "Logistics," Brittany repeated slowly, as if she were tasting a sour lemon. "And you, Mrs. Langford?" "I am a pediatric surgeon at Mount Sinai Hospital," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a profound, deep-seated rage. "And these are our children. We are going on an anniversary vacation." Brittany leaned over the counter, peering down at their son and daughter. Their daughter shrank back, hiding her face in her mother's coat. Their son stood his ground, but his grip on his backpack tightened. "Are these your biological children?" Brittany asked. The world seemed to stop spinning. The ambient noise of the terminal muted into a dull, rushing sound in Marcus's ears. It was a question so wildly inappropriate, so aggressively invasive, that for a split second, Marcus thought he had misheard her. "Excuse me," Marcus said, the icy calm of his exterior finally cracking. "I need to verify that these minors are traveling with their legal guardians," Brittany continued, entirely unfazed by the shock she had just inflicted. "With child trafficking on the rise, and given the lack of resemblance in certain facial features, I have a right to inquire." Elena's face flushed with fury. "How dare you! Look at their passports! Look at the birth dates! They have our last name. You are wildly out of line." "Ma'am, if you raise your voice at me again, I will have you removed from the terminal," Brittany threatened, her hand moving purposefully toward the black walkie-talkie clipped to her shoulder. "I am a federal gate agent, and you are creating a disturbance." "We are not creating a disturbance," Marcus said, stepping slightly in front of his wife, shielding her and the kids. "You are deliberately profiling us. You haven't scanned our boarding passes. You haven't scanned the passports. You are acting entirely on your own prejudice. Scan the tickets." "I am securing this gate," Brittany declared loudly. She unclipped the walkie-talkie, bringing it to her mouth. "Dispatch, this is Gate 42. I have a hostile passenger situation in the priority lane. Potential document fraud. I need a security officer immediately." "Hostile?" Elena echoed in disbelief. Their daughter began to cry, the loud, frightened wails of a young child who understands that something is terribly wrong, even if she doesn't know what it is. Their son reached out and held his sister's hand, looking up at his father with wide, anxious eyes. "Dad," he whispered, "are we going to jail?" "No, son," Marcus said, his heart breaking at the fear in his son's voice. He knelt down again, ignoring Brittany entirely for a moment. "Nobody's going to jail. We are going to Paris. I promise you. Just hold your sister's hand and stay right here with Mom." Within moments, heavy footsteps echoed on the floor. A portly airport security officer, with the name tag Derek Hale, pushed his way through the gathering crowd of onlookers. Officer Hale rested his hands on his utility belt, puffing out his chest to look as intimidating as possible. "What's the problem here, Brittany?" Officer Hale asked, giving Marcus a hard, suspicious look. These individuals presented first-class tickets they cannot financially verify, and their passports are highly suspicious, Brittany reported, gesturing to the Langfords as if they were a cartel ring she had just busted. "The husband is acting aggressively and refusing to cooperate with standard anti-fraud protocols. I need them removed from the boarding area so I can process the legitimate passengers." Officer Hale turned to Marcus. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the line. Take your family and move over to the holding wall." "Officer," Marcus said, his voice steady, "we are legitimate passengers. We have valid passports and valid boarding passes. She has refused to scan them. If the gate agent says you need to step aside, you step aside," Hale ordered, his tone leaving no room for debate. He unclipped a set of zip ties from his belt, letting them dangle visibly in his hand, a silent, terrifying threat. "Do not make me ask you again, sir. Step aside." Humiliated, enraged, and acutely aware of the dozens of cell phones that had suddenly been raised in the crowd, recording their every move, Marcus looked at his wife. Elena nodded tightly, her eyes shining with unshed tears of frustration. They gathered their bags, took their children by the hands, and stepped out of the red-carpeted lane, exiled to the cold, blank wall near the trash cans. Brittany Langford smiled a victorious, smug grin. "Thank you," she announced to the rest of the passengers. "General boarding for first class will now commence. We appreciate your patience while we keep the skies safe." Marcus watched as the white couple behind them, Marcus Hale and his wife, eagerly handed over their passes. Brittany scanned them with a cheerful beep and waved them through. No questions about occupations. No questions about their credit cards. No questions about their children. It was in that precise moment that Marcus Langford stopped being a frustrated passenger and reverted to being an apex corporate predator. Standing by the trash can, surrounded by the murmur of gawking strangers, Elena pulled the children into a tight hug. Their daughter was sobbing softly into Elena's coat, while their son stared at the floor, humiliated. "Marcus, what do we do?" Elena whispered fiercely, keeping her back to the crowd. "They have our passports. They're going to make us miss the flight. Should I call our lawyer?" Marcus stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on Brittany Langford, who was merrily scanning boarding passes, occasionally glancing over at them with a look of supreme satisfaction. Officer Hale stood a few feet away, acting as a guard dog to ensure the Langfords didn't move. "No," Marcus said quietly. His voice was no longer warm, nor was it defensive. It was glacial. "A lawyer will take too long. By the time a lawyer gets an injunction, this flight is over the Atlantic." "Then what?" Elena pleaded. "I ask for her supervisor," Marcus said. He took a deliberate breath, smoothed the front of his jacket, and walked back toward the edge of the boarding podium. Officer Hale immediately stepped into his path, holding up a hand. "I told you to stay against the wall, buddy." "I need to speak to the supervisor on duty," Marcus said, ignoring Hale and projecting his voice toward Brittany. "Right now." Brittany paused mid-scan, looking over Hale's shoulder. She let out a short, mocking laugh. "I am the supervisor for this gate, sir. My word is final. I've already submitted your passports to the federal database for background verification. It could take hours. I suggest you get comfortable." She held up the 4 passports, tapping them against the counter before sliding them into a drawer beneath her keyboard. She was confiscating them. Marcus felt the anger spike hot and dangerous, but he pushed it down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He raised it, pointing the camera lens directly at Brittany. "I am recording this interaction," Marcus stated clearly. "I want you to state your full name, your employee ID number, and the exact reason you have confiscated the federal identification of my family without cause." Brittany's eyes widened in sudden, genuine fury. She pointed a finger at him. "Put that phone away right now. Recording airline personnel in a secure boarding area is a federal offense under the Patriot Act. Officer Hale, confiscate his phone." It was a blatant, ridiculous lie, and Marcus knew it. "It is not a federal offense to record in a public terminal," Marcus shot back, not lowering the device. "Do not touch my property, officer, or my next call will be to the NYPD for assault and theft." Hale hesitated, his hand hovering near Marcus's phone, but not quite making contact. He wasn't entirely sure of the law himself, and Marcus's absolute, unwavering confidence was making him second-guess his orders. Brittany slammed her hand on the desk. "Fine, record me. My name is Brittany Langford, and I am denying you boarding because you are exhibiting erratic, threatening behavior, and I have reasonable suspicion of fraud. You will not be getting on this airplane today. Flight to Paris is closed to the Langford family." She reached over and slammed the physical boarding closed sign onto the edge of her desk. The final passengers were already walking down the jet bridge. The plane was scheduled to push back soon. Time was officially up. Marcus slowly lowered his phone, stopping the recording. He looked at Brittany Langford. He looked at the drawer where she had locked away his family's passports. He looked at his wife, standing against the wall, trying to dry the tears from their daughter's face. "Okay," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You want to play the corporate policy game? Let's play." He didn't return to the wall. Instead, he turned his back to the gate, holding his phone in both hands. He didn't open his standard contact list. He opened a secure, encrypted app designed for Apex Holdings executive communications. He scrolled past regional managers, past legal counsel, until he found the VIP directory for partner corporations. He found the name Victor Lang, CEO, Trans Global Airways. Marcus had sat across from Victor Lang at a mahogany conference table recently, finalizing a massive catering and logistics contract renewal. Victor had personally shaken Marcus's hand, clapped him on the shoulder, and given him his direct private mobile number. "Anything you ever need, Marcus. You and Apex are the lifeblood of our ground operations. You call me anytime." Marcus hit the green dial button. He put the phone to his ear. Ring. Behind him, he could hear Brittany talking to Officer Hale. "Unbelievable," she scoffed. "He's probably calling his little friends to complain. Go tell the pilot we have a baggage offload for the Langford party. Get their suitcases out of the cargo hold." "Come on, Victor," Marcus muttered under his breath. Click. "Victor Lang," a crisp, authoritative voice answered. "Victor, it's Marcus Langford, Executive VP at Apex Holdings." There was a brief pause, followed by a warm, familiar chuckle. "Marcus, good to hear from you, my friend. To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me we don't have a logistics strike in Chicago." "No strike, Victor, but we do have a massive problem," Marcus said, his voice deadly serious. "I am currently standing at Gate 42 in JFK Terminal 4, trying to board your flight to Paris for our anniversary. And your gate agent, a woman named Brittany Langford, has just illegally confiscated my family's passports, accused me of child trafficking, and denied us boarding because she doesn't believe a black family can afford first class." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. The warmth evaporated instantly, replaced by the chilling, hyper-focused quiet of a CEO who has just been handed a catastrophic liability. "Excuse me." Victor's voice was now razor-sharp. "Say that again." Marcus quickly, efficiently recounted the last several minutes. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't need to. He gave the exact details. The refusal to scan the tickets, the questions about his children's parentage, the threat of arrest, the locked passports. "Marcus," Victor said, his voice vibrating with a terrifying corporate wrath, "where is this agent right now? She's standing 10 feet behind me, instructing security to offload our bags from the plane. Do not move, Victor ordered. Do not hang up. I am patching my chief operating officer and the JFK terminal director onto this line right now. Hold for 10 seconds. Marcus stood in the middle of the concourse, the phone pressed to his ear. Behind him, Brittany Langford was typing up her incident report, feeling the supreme rush of power that came with putting someone she deemed unworthy in their place. She picked up her landline phone to call the baggage handlers. Before she could dial a single digit, the red emergency light on her gate console began to flash violently. It was the direct line from corporate HQ, a line that only rang for bomb threats, hijackings, or immediate executive overrides. The piercing high-pitched chirp of the red phone echoed across the empty gate area. Brittany stared at it, confused. She let go of her standard phone and slowly picked up the red receiver. Gate 42, Langford speaking, she said. Brenda! Brittany Langford! A voice resonated through the line. It was not a dispatcher. It was not the terminal manager. It was a voice that possessed the smooth, terrifying cadence of absolute power. A voice Brittany had only heard on company-wide training videos and quarterly earnings broadcasts. This is Victor Lang, Chief Executive Officer of Transglobal Airways. Brittany's stomach plummeted into her shoes. She let out a nervous, breathless scoff. Is this a joke? Who is this really? This is not a joke, Brittany. A second, equally sharp female voice cut in. This is Sophia Lang, Chief Operating Officer. We are currently patching in Elliot Graves, your JFK Terminal Director. I strongly advise you to listen very carefully to what Mr. Lang is about to tell you. Brittany felt the color drain from her face. She gripped the edge of the podium to steady herself. Her eyes darted frantically toward the man standing 10 feet away. Marcus Langford was still holding his cell phone to his ear, his eyes locked onto hers with the predatory calm of a lion watching its prey step into a snare. I am currently looking at the live security feed of Gate 42, Victor Lang said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register. I see you standing at the podium. I see Officer Hale to your left, and I see a passenger, Mr. Marcus Langford, standing in the concourse. Brittany, you have exactly 10 seconds to open the middle drawer of your desk, retrieve the 4 passports you illegally confiscated, and hand them back to that man. Sir? Mr. Lang? Brittany stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. With all due respect, you don't understand the situation here on the ground. The system flagged. The system flagged nothing, Victor roared, the sudden volume making Brittany flinch backward. Do not lie to me. We have already pulled the digital logs from your terminal. You manually bypassed the standard boarding scan and initiated a secondary background lock. You did this on your own volition. He couldn't produce the credit card, Brittany stammered desperately, clutching at the evaporating threads of her authority. And the passports looked tampered with. The children, they didn't look like them. It is my job to prevent child trafficking and ticket fraud. I am protecting the airline. You are exposing this airline to a catastrophic federal lawsuit, Sophia Lang snapped. You are not a Customs and Border Protection agent, Brittany. You have absolutely zero legal authority to confiscate federal identification documents. Zero. Now shut your mouth and listen to me. Victor, Elliot Graves, the JFK terminal director, joined the call, his voice breathless. I am leaving Terminal 3 right now. I am 2 minutes away. You are not to touch that computer. You are DM'd. You are not to speak another word to the Langford family. Do you understand me? Mr. Graves, please, Brittany begged, tears of genuine panic finally welling in her eyes. I was just following security protocols. You followed your own prejudice, Brittany, Victor Lang said, and it just cost you your career. Put the passports on the counter and step away from the podium. Now. The line clicked dead bored. Brittany stood frozen, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. Her hands were shaking violently. Officer Hale leaned in, his brow furrowed. Brittany. Hey, what's going on? Should I go ahead and call the baggage handlers to pull their luggage? Brittany slowly placed the red receiver back onto its cradle. She looked at Officer Hale, her rigid, authoritative posture completely collapsing. She looked like a deflated balloon. 10 feet away, Marcus lowered his own cell phone and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't gloat. He didn't yell. He simply stood there, waiting for the storm he had just summoned to make landfall. It took exactly moments for Elliot Graves to arrive. The JFK terminal director sprinted down the concourse, a frantic, sweating man in a tailored blue suit, flanked by 2 breathless trans-global corporate customer service liaisons. He didn't even look at the long line of economy passengers who were murmuring and pointing. He bypassed the velvet ropes entirely and made a beeline straight for Marcus and Elena Langford. Officer Hale stepped forward, placing a hand on his belt. "Hey, hold on, sir. This is a secure—" "Stand down, officer," Graves barked, not breaking his stride. He flashed his gold-level terminal access badge. Hale took one look at the credentials and immediately backed away, his hands raised in surrender. Graves slid to a halt in front of the Langford family. He was gasping for air, but he immediately forced himself into a posture of absolute deference. "Mr. Langford, Dr. Langford," Graves said, his voice trembling slightly. He placed his hand over his heart. "I am Elliot Graves, Director of Operations for Transglobal, JFK. There are no words. I cannot adequately express the depth of my apologies for what you have endured this morning." Elena, who had been shielding their daughter from the stares of the crowd, looked at Graves in shock. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her a subtle, reassuring nod. "Mr. Graves," Marcus said evenly, "your agent has our passports." "Not for another second, sir," Graves said. Graves spun around and marched toward the podium. The crowd of passengers, sensing a massive shift in the dramatic narrative, fell completely silent. Even Marcus Hale, the impatient businessman who had scoffed at the Langfords earlier, was now watching with wide, mesmerized eyes. Brittany was standing behind the computer, her face an ashen mask of terror. "Elliot, please," Brittany whispered as he approached. "You know me. I've been here for decades. The system, it looked wrong." "Do not say another word, Brittany," Graves hissed, his voice low enough that only she and Officer Hale could hear, but laced with absolute venom. "Open the drawer." Brittany's trembling hands fumbled with the latch. She pulled the drawer open. Graves reached in and snatched the 4 navy blue passports. He inspected them quickly to ensure they hadn't been damaged, then turned his back on her, walking them straight over to Marcus. He handed them over with a deep, respectful bow of his head. "Your documents, Mr. Langford. And again, my profound apologies." "Thank you, Elliot," Marcus said, slipping the passport securely into the breast pocket of his coat. "Now, what is being done about her?" Graves turned back to the podium. He pointed a finger at Brittany. "Brittany, step out from behind the console." "Mr. Graves," she begged, a tear finally spilling over her heavy mascara. "You know me. I've been here for decades." "Step out," he commanded loudly. Slowly, Brittany shuffled out from behind the protective fortress of her podium. She looked small, stripped of the power she had wielded so recklessly just moments prior. "Hand over your corporate credentials, your ID badge, and your radio," Graves ordered. Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. People were actively recording on their phones, now capturing the spectacular downfall. "You're firing me?" Brittany cried, her voice cracking. "Right here, after decades of keeping this airline safe, you are suspended, pending immediate termination, effective this exact second," Graves stated, his voice ringing with finality. "Corporate Human Resources will contact you regarding the federal review of your unauthorized confiscation of government documents. Your pension status will be determined by the legal department. Hand over the badge, Brittany." With shaking, defeated hands, Brittany unclipped the heavy plastic badge from her lapel and placed it on the counter next to her walkie-talkie. Graves turned to Officer Hale, who was doing his absolute best to blend into the background linoleum. "Officer, you are to escort Miss Langford to the employee locker room to collect her personal belongings, and then you will escort her off airport property. She is permanently banned from the secure zone." Hale nodded eagerly, relieved he wasn't going down with the ship. "Yes, sir, right away." He gently grasped Brittany's elbow. "Come on, ma'am, let's go." As Brittany Langford was led away, head bowed, shoulders slumped, walking past the very trash cans she had exiled the Langfords to, the terminal was dead silent. There was no sympathy. There was only the stunned realization that justice, cold and swift, had just been served. Graves turned back to the Langfords, forcing a warm, professional smile. "Mr. Langford, Dr. Langford, the flight to Paris has been held for you. Your luggage is secure in the hold. If you will allow me the honor, I would like to personally escort you down the jet bridge." Marcus looked down at his wife. Elena's posture had relaxed, a fierce, triumphant light returning to her eyes. She reached down and took their son and daughter by the hands. "I think we're ready for Paris," Elena said. "Right this way," Graves beamed. As the Langford family walked down the red carpet of the priority lane, the two corporate liaisons hastily grabbed their carry-on bags, acting as their personal porters. They bypassed the scanner entirely. At the end of the jet bridge, standing in the doorway of the massive Boeing 777, was the aircraft's captain. He had been briefed. As Marcus stepped onto the plane, the captain extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Langford," the captain said warmly. "We apologize for the delay. We are honored to fly you and your family today." They were led to their spacious pod-like first-class seats. Flight attendants immediately swooped in, offering Elena a glass of premium champagne and presenting their son and daughter with golden pilot wings and baskets of gourmet snacks. As Marcus settled into seat 2A, he felt his wife's hand slip into his. "You didn't call a lawyer," Elena whispered, a smile playing on her lips. "You called the CEO." Marcus picked up his glass of sparkling water, clinking it gently against her champagne flute. "I told you nobody was going to jail," he replied smoothly. "Now turn off your phone. We're going on vacation." The heavy sound-dampening curtain separating first class from the rest of the Boeing 777 slid shut, sealing the Langford family inside a sanctuary of polished wood, soft leather, and ambient mood lighting. The roar of the jet engines was reduced to a soothing, distant hum as the aircraft banked out over the Atlantic Ocean, leaving the concrete sprawl of New York and Brittany Langford far behind them. Elena leaned her seat back into a slight recline, kicking off her loafers and sliding her feet into the plush slippers provided in the amenity kit. Across the aisle, their son and daughter were already engrossed in the in-flight entertainment system, their noise-canceling headphones dwarfing their small heads as they watched animated movies, mouths full of warm, salted macadamia nuts. "I have to admit," Elena said, turning her head to look at Marcus. She held up her crystal flute, watching the champagne bubbles dance toward the surface. "When you told me we were flying transglobal, I didn't realize you owned the airline." Marcus chuckled, a deep, resonant sound that finally released the last remnants of tension from his shoulders. "I don't own them, Elena, but Apex handles hundreds of millions of their ground logistics annually. From the food on this plane to the tugs that pushed us back from the gate, my signature is on the invoice." "Well, whatever it is, I have never seen a woman's soul leave her body quite like that," Elena mused, taking a slow sip of her drink. Her smile faded slightly, replaced by a thoughtful frown. "But Marcus, what if you weren't the executive VP of Apex? What if you were just a regular guy who saved up for years to take his family on a trip? What would have happened to us?" The question hung heavily in the pressurized cabin air. It was the exact thought that had been gnawing at Marcus since they walked down the jet bridge. "We would have missed the flight," Marcus said quietly, his jaw tightening. We would have been humiliated, dragged out of the terminal by security, and forced to spend the next months fighting a bureaucratic nightmare just to get our money back. And Brittany Langford would have gone to lunch, feeling like a patriot. Marcus opened his laptop on the tray table in front of him and connected to the aircraft's high-speed satellite Wi-Fi. As soon as the connection established, his email inbox immediately populated with a flurry of urgent messages. At the very top, marked with maximum priority, was an email from Sophia Lang, the Chief Operating Officer of Trans Global Airways. CC'd on the message was Victor Lang and the airline's head of human resources. Looks like the corporate shockwaves have hit Chicago, Marcus muttered, opening the encrypted message. Elena leaned over the wide armrest to read the screen. The email was not a standard corporate apology. It was a deeply confidential crisis management brief shared with Marcus because of his executive status and their intertwined business interests. Marcus, the email read. Once again, Victor and I extend our deepest apologies. I am writing to provide you with full transparency regarding the incident at Gate 42. Following your call, we initiated an immediate zero-tolerance audit of Brittany Langford's employment history. What we uncovered is deeply disturbing. Marcus's eyes scanned the paragraphs, his brow furrowing as a new, infuriating twist revealed itself. Langford's personnel file contained multiple separate complaints over the years, all citing discriminatory behavior, secondary ticketing harassment, and unwarranted security escalations. Shockingly, the vast majority of these complaints were filed by minority passengers traveling in premium cabins. Langford systematically profiled passengers of color, utilizing a loophole in our agent discretion policy to manually flag tickets she deemed suspicious. Multiple times, Elena whispered, her hands balling into fists. She did this to multiple other families, and she was still working the gate. Marcus continued reading. These complaints were never escalated to the corporate level. They were intercepted and buried by the former JFK terminal manager, who allowed Langford to operate unchecked under the guise of proactive security. He retired years ago with a full pension. Let me be clear, Marcus, the email continued. We are not sweeping this under the rug. Elliot Graves has officially terminated Langford's employment with cause, effectively voiding her severance package. Furthermore, we are turning her files, along with the former manager's logs, over to the Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Division. We are initiating a complete overhaul of our gate protocols, entirely removing the agent discretion clause for manual background locks. An algorithmic override will now be required, necessitating secondary authorization from a remote terminal director. They're burning it down, Marcus said, a grim satisfaction settling in his chest. Victor isn't just firing her. He's making an example out of the entire terminal's management culture. Good, Elena said fiercely. She weaponized her little podium. Now she gets to see what happens when the people she profiles have bigger weapons. Marcus typed out a brief professional reply, thanking Sophia and Victor for their swift action, and confirming that Apex Holdings would be monitoring the implementation of these new policies closely. He hit send, closed the laptop, and finally allowed himself to sink completely into the luxury of the flight. For the duration of the flight, they were pampered relentlessly. The flight attendants, clearly aware of the gravity of the VIPs in row 2, anticipated every need. Multi-course meals were served on fine china. Wine pairings were poured with sommelier precision. And when the cabin lights dimmed, the seats transformed into lie-flat beds, dressed in high thread-count linens. As Marcus lay in the dark, listening to the rhythmic, synchronized breathing of his sleeping wife and children, he felt a profound sense of protective victory. He had drawn a line in the sand, and an entire corporate empire had shifted to accommodate it. In the days that followed, the Langford family was sitting on the sun-drenched balcony of their suite, at a luxurious hotel in Paris, a platter of fresh pastries and café au lait resting on the wrought iron table between them. The Eiffel Tower loomed magnificently in the distance, a testament to engineering and endurance. The trauma of JFK Terminal 4 felt like a distant nightmare, completely overshadowed by private Louvre tours, Sunset Seine river cruises, and watching their son and daughter eat their weight in macarons. Marcus's personal phone buzzed on the table. It was a New York number. He picked it up, recognizing the caller ID. It was Lena Hart, the fiercely brilliant lead litigator for Apex Holdings. "Lena," Marcus answered, taking a sip of his coffee. "I thought I told you I was off the clock for weeks." "You are, Marcus." Lena's sharp, confident voice crackled through the speaker. "But I thought you'd want a real-time update on the mess you left behind in New York. You've been making headlines, my friend." Marcus sat up slightly, gesturing for Elena to listen in. "What headlines?" "Well, Brittany Langford decided she wasn't going to go down quietly," Lena explained, the amusement in her voice palpable. "She went to a prominent tabloid news outlet. She tried to spin a massive sob story, claimed she was a dedicated working-class gate agent who was wrongfully terminated simply for following federal security protocols. She alleged reverse discrimination and claimed a powerful, wealthy black executive used his corporate connections to bully her out of a job just because she asked for a credit card." Elena gasped, nearly dropping her croissant. "Are you kidding me? She went to the press?" "Oh, she tried to play the ultimate martyr." Lena laughed. "She even hired a discount lawyer to draft a wrongful termination lawsuit against TransGlobal, demanding her pension and public reinstatement." "I assume TransGlobal didn't take kindly to that," Marcus said, his voice cold. "TransGlobal unleashed hell," Lena corrected. "Sophia Lang and their legal team didn't even wait for a court date, because you verbally stated you were recording the interaction, and because Langford escalated the situation by bringing Officer Hale into the frame. The airport security cameras captured the entire thing. High-definition video. Directional audio." Marcus smiled. The Patriot Act, the very law Langford had tried to use to intimidate him, mandated continuous high-grade surveillance at boarding gates. TransGlobal's PR department released a heavily redacted timeline of events to the press, effectively legally neutralizing her narrative. Lena continued. But the real nail in the coffin was the union. The gate agents union backed down, Marcus asked, genuinely surprised. Unions were notoriously protective, even of their worst members. TransGlobal showed the union reps the video, and then they showed them the multiple buried HR complaints from minority passengers, Lena said. The union president took one look at the evidence, realized defending her would look like they were endorsing systemic racial profiling, and publicly washed their hands of her. They issued a statement condemning her actions and refused to provide her with legal counsel. "So she's completely isolated," Marcus summarized. "She's done," Lena confirmed. Her discount lawyer dropped her the second the union backed out, and the evidence was presented. TransGlobal has permanently revoked her pension under the gross misconduct clause of her contract, and the FAA has placed a flag on her credentials. She will never work in aviation security or customer service again. She's currently trending on social media, and let me tell you, the internet remains undefeated. They are tearing her apart. Marcus looked out over the Parisian skyline. He didn't feel pity. He felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a scale balanced. "What about the airline's policies?" Marcus asked. Always the logistics man, always looking at the systemic angle. "That's the best part," Lena said softly. TransGlobal officially announced a system-wide software patch. They're calling it an internal equity overhaul. Gate agents are now entirely locked out of the secondary background screening system. If a ticket is flagged, It automatically routes to a centralized corporate security desk for blind review, meaning the reviewer only sees the financial data, not the passenger's name, age, or race. They literally cannot profile. Marcus felt a sudden, unexpected tightness in his throat. It wasn't just a victory for his family anymore. It was a victory for every person who had ever stood in a line, felt the burning sting of unwarranted suspicion, and had no power to fight back. "Lena," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for the update. Send my regards to the team." "Enjoy Paris, Marcus, you earned it," Lena replied before hanging up. Marcus set the phone down. He looked at Elena, whose eyes were shining with pride. "They changed the software," Marcus told her quietly. "Blind reviews. She can never do it again. Nobody can." Elena reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. Below them, the City of Lights was waking up, bustling with life, art, and history. Their son and daughter burst onto the balcony, arguing over who got to hold the map for their trip to the catacombs that afternoon. Marcus looked at his children, safe, happy, and entirely unaware of the ugly machinery of prejudice that had tried to grind them down just days before. He had protected them. He had protected their joy. And in doing so, he had forced a massive corporation to protect thousands of others. "Come on," Marcus said, standing up and tossing a few euros onto the table. He scooped their daughter into his arms, kissing her cheek as she giggled. "Let's go see the city. We have a lot of celebrating to do." The reality is, systemic profiling happens every single day, often to people who don't have a CEO's personal number on speed dial. Marcus Langford's story is a powerful reminder that prejudice thrives in the shadows of authority, but it shatters when confronted with unyielding confidence, documented truth, and institutional accountability. Brittany Langford thought she was gatekeeping the skies. Instead, she triggered a complete overhaul of corporate policy. If this story of justice and holding the powerful accountable fired you up, hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who loves seeing a bully get exactly what they deserve. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible real-life stories of people standing their ground. Drop a comment below. How would you have handled Brittany at the gate?